They say the heart knows before the mind does. That gut feeling you get, subtle, slippery, easy to dismiss until it blooms into something undeniable. Looking back, I think I always knew. The late nights, the distracted glances, the faint but unfamiliar cologne that clung to her clothes like a whisper. At first, I told myself she was just tired, that life with a toddler had taken its toll, that the spark had simply dimmed with time. But now, I know I was clinging to a version of her that no longer existed. My name is Daniel Porter, 36 years old, father to a 2-year-old boy, husband, at least in name, to a woman I thought I understood better than anyone. Sarah and I had been married for 5 years, and for most of that time, I would have bet my life on her loyalty. We met at a friend's wedding, classic rom-com timing. She spilled red wine on my shirt and spent the rest of the night apologizing and laughing in equal measure. Her laugh was the kind that drew eyes from across the room. Bright, unguarded, musical. We built a quiet life in the suburbs just outside of Boston. I worked from home in software sales, juggling conference calls and time with our son, Owen. Sarah had gone back to working part-time at the floral section of a nearby supermarket chain called Miller's. She said it gave her something of herself back, something to do outside diapers and routines. The store was only 15 minutes from home, and it wasn't unusual for her to pick up an extra shift here or there, especially around holidays when flowers flew off shelves. I didn't mind. She always came home with stories, funny coworkers, difficult customers, quirky coworkers with weird hobbies. That's how I first heard his name. Marcus, she said one night as we folded laundry. Does this hilarious thing with paper bags when he's bored. Like little origami animals. The guy's a total dork. I'd smiled, barely registering the name. Just a coworker. But Marcus came up again. And again. Marcus brought in donuts this morning, totally ruined my diet. Marcus says I should watch that documentary on bees. Says it'll blow my mind. Marcus helped me lift some heavy stuff in the back. Thank God he was there. And I kept smiling, kept nodding, kept telling myself I trusted my wife. But small things started to stack up. I'd find texts from numbers I didn't recognize on her phone, messages deleted so quickly I couldn't read more than a few words. She'd turn her screen away from me during dinner. She started dressing differently for work. More makeup, tighter jeans, low-cut tops she hadn't worn since our dating days. She said she wanted to feel good again, to remind herself she was more than just a mom. I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. Then came the day I picked her up from the store. Her car was in the shop, and I had a long lunch window. I arrived 10 minutes early and parked, watching the automatic glass doors as people trickled out with groceries and bouquets. I saw her before she saw me, by the loading dock out back, laughing, head tilted back, hair catching the sunlight. And next to her, Marcus. He was maybe mid-20s, lean and tall with a shaggy kind of charm. Cheap cologne, a patchy beard, and a crooked grin that suggested too much confidence. He stood too close. She didn't flinch. When she touched his arm, it was with a familiarity that drained the blood from my face. I didn't confront her then. I didn't even move. I waited until she returned to the front of the store, acting like nothing had happened. She got into the car, kissed me on the cheek like she always did. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Thanks for picking me up, she said. I owe you one. You owe me so much more than that, I thought, but said nothing. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene. Her laugh, the way she looked at him, the casual intimacy of their body language. It was a look she used to give me, back when we were new. By morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be that guy who watched his marriage crumble from the sidelines. I needed the truth, even if it gutted me. I installed a monitoring app on our shared computer, one she rarely used. It was legal, barely, but desperation has a way of loosening one's grip on ethics. I checked it every night after she went to bed. For weeks, there was nothing. Empty browser history, bland emails, a few Pinterest recipes. Then one Wednesday evening, there it was. A Gmail tab she'd forgotten to close. An email from a burner account. Meet behind the deli at 8. Same spot. Don't be late, winking face. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago. I stared at the screen, hands trembling. The subject line simply read, M. Marcus. The next day, I told her I'd be working late and asked if she could put Owen to bed. She kissed me goodbye, not knowing I had no intention of staying late. I drove to the store and parked behind the row of dumpsters near the employee entrance. The minutes dragged like hours. At exactly 7:57 p.m., she appeared. Hair down, lipstick bold, a hint of perfume I hadn't smelled in months. Marcus joined her seconds later. He had a baseball cap pulled low, and he looked around before leaning in to kiss her. A full kiss. Not a peck, not a friendly hug, a kiss. Long, hungry, like they'd done it 100 times before. I sat in my car, heart thundering, unable to look away. She laughed, that laugh, and I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned the ignition and drove away before I could do something I'd regret. The next morning, I dropped Owen at daycare and took a drive along the coast. I needed space, air, clarity. My mind kept racing in circles. How long? Why him? Why now? I thought about confrontation, about yelling, throwing accusations, making her cry. But none of that would fix it. None of it would rewind time to the nights we danced in the kitchen or whispered to each other before sleep. She came home that night with a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. Said they were about to go bad at the store and figured they'd brighten up the kitchen. They didn't. Not anymore. Not now that I knew. But I smiled anyway, placed them in the vase by the sink, and thanked her. I was going to play along. For now, let her think I didn't know. Let her think she still had control. Because the truth was, this wasn't just her betrayal. It was going to be our war. And I wasn't planning to lose. The days that followed felt like I was living in a surreal stage play. Every smile, every conversation with Sarah was just another line in a performance I hadn't signed up for. I moved through our house like a ghost, hovering behind the man I used to be. But under that calm surface, something sharp had started to grow. It wasn't just pain or anger, it was purpose. I started documenting everything. Each late shift she picked up at Miller's went into a spreadsheet, time-stamped, dated, and cross-checked with Owen's daycare records. When she said she was heading out to run errands or meet a friend, I wrote it down. I also bought a second phone. Something cheap, disposable. I installed a recording app on it and dropped it in the pocket of her car's passenger seat one morning while she showered. The first recording confirmed more than I was ready for. Her voice, soft and familiar, laced with excitement. His, slightly nasal, cracking jokes and calling her babe. I sat in the garage with my headphones on, gripping the steering wheel of my car so hard my knuckles turned white. They talked about mundane things, his crappy apartment, a movie he wanted her to watch, how she should wear that little yellow sundress next time. And then the silence. That long, unmistakable silence where mouths are occupied and breathing turns uneven. I turned it off. The thing about betrayal, it doesn't just hit you all at once. It seeps in. You feel it at the grocery store when you realize you're alone pushing a cart for a family that's just an illusion. You feel it folding her laundry, recognizing the new lace bra she never wore around you. You feel it when your son points to a drawing and says, "Mommy says she's going to take me to the beach with her friend Marcus." That one broke me. I knew I couldn't keep pretending much longer, but I also couldn't just confront her. Not yet. Not when I could feel something bigger forming beneath all of this. I needed her to dig her own grave. That opportunity came in the form of our anniversary. She forgot. Not a card, not a text. Nothing. I didn't remind her. Instead, I cooked a meal, nothing elaborate, just her favorite pasta and a bottle of wine we'd been saving. I lit candles, set the table. Then I waited. She walked in 2 hours late, cheeks flushed, the smell of cheap floral body spray trailing behind her like breadcrumbs. She stopped when she saw the setup. "Oh, Dan, I didn't know you were cooking tonight." "It's August 17th, I said, not looking up from the plate I was garnishing. She blinked. "Is that our anniversary?" Her face paled. "Oh my God, Dan, I'm so sorry. Things have been so busy and It's okay," I said calmly, finally meeting her eyes. "Sit. Eat." She did. Awkwardly. The clink of forks and knives filled the silence. I watched her carefully. Every twitch. Every glance at her phone. "You seem distracted," I said halfway through the meal. "Just tired," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "From work? Or from Marcus?" The fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" "You heard me." For a long second, nothing moved. Then she set the fork down slowly, placing her napkin in her lap. "Dan, what are you talking about?" "I know. I've known for weeks." Her face contorted, first with shock, then with denial, then panic. "You're wrong. she said quickly. Marcus and I are just co-workers. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. Do co-workers kiss behind the loading dock? Do they meet during your so-called shifts and talk about how your husband's too dull to notice anything? Do they? Should I keep going? Her lip trembled. You've been spying on me? I've been watching you trade in our marriage for a fantasy. Yes, I've been documenting every lie. She stood, pushing back from the table, her face flushed. This isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think, Sarah. You made a choice. Over and over. And now you're going to deal with the consequences. She looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. I couldn't afford to. I had been crying inside for weeks, holding the wreckage together with shaking hands. That night, she slept in the guest room. I stayed up until dawn, scrolling through pictures, emails, screenshots, piecing it all together. The next day, I met with an attorney. She was younger than I expected, but sharp, direct, efficient. Massachusetts law doesn't technically require fault in divorce, she explained, but evidence of infidelity can impact things like alimony, custody, and the division of assets. If we can prove emotional instability or a breach of marital trust, we'll have leverage. I have recordings, I said. Photos, dates, everything. She nodded approvingly. Then let's use them. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. Reclaiming something that had been stolen from me in whispers and secret meetings. I wasn't going to let Sarah paint herself as a victim or an innocent. Not when she'd been unraveling our life one kiss at a time. That weekend, I told my parents. They offered to take Owen for a few days, give him a break from the growing tension in the house. He doesn't need to see this, my mother said softly, placing her hand on mine. I nodded. It felt like failure, but it also felt like clarity. Sarah didn't protest. She hugged Owen goodbye and cried as she watched the car pull out of the driveway. But she still didn't confess. She didn't apologize. She just said, maybe some space will help us both. That night, she left the house around 8:30 p.m., claiming she needed a walk to clear her head. She didn't take her phone, but I knew better. I followed her. She didn't go to a park. She didn't go to a friend's. She went to Marcus's apartment above the gas station at the edge of town. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. When I reached the alley by his building, I pulled out my phone and hit record. They were on the balcony, laughing, drinking, kissing. She looked like a teenager again, like someone I didn't know, like someone who had forgotten what real love felt like. And then, mid-laugh, Sarah glanced toward the street. Her eyes landed on me. Frozen. Caught. I didn't move. She stood, wine glass still in hand, and took a step toward the railing. But before she could say a word, Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She didn't push him away. She didn't even look back at me. She just closed her eyes and leaned into him. For the rest of that night, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, letting the dark swallow me whole. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not after seeing that balcony scene burned into my memory like a scar. I parked at the old marina on the edge of town, staring out at the still water, glassy and indifferent under the moonlight. It was strange, how something so peaceful could reflect a life so violently disrupted. The reflection in the windshield wasn't mine anymore. It was someone older, wearier, someone who'd seen his trust crumpled like an old receipt at the bottom of his wife's purse. In the weeks that followed, the distance between us transformed from subtle to seismic. We shared a roof, but not a life. Meals were silent, our conversations sterile, like co-workers making polite small talk in a break room. I pretended not to notice the texts she sent when she thought I wasn't looking. She pretended she wasn't still disappearing every other evening under the pretense of needing air or running errands. She never brought up the balcony. Neither did I. Instead, I let her lie. I let her dig the hole deeper. My lawyer, Brenna, was a force of nature. She instructed me to keep the peace, to wait. Timing, she said, is everything. The court will see emotional instability, abandonment, and infidelity, but we need it framed just right. So I played along. I cooked meals. I kissed Owen goodnight. I even asked Sarah how work was, knowing full well she hadn't clocked a real shift in weeks. You're quiet lately, she said one night as we folded Owen's laundry. I looked up from a tiny shirt I was rolling neatly. Am I? She studied me, her expression unreadable. You've barely spoken to me in days. What would you like me to say, Sarah? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted down to the pile of laundry between us. Nothing. Never mind. It was the closest she came to an apology. Then came the slip-up. It was a Friday night. I'd come home a bit early from picking Owen up, and her car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't think much of it until I noticed something strange. Her work badge was on the kitchen counter, still clipped to her lanyard. That, in itself, wouldn't have mattered, except she had texted me earlier saying she was staying late to close. I checked the location tracker I'd hidden in her car weeks ago. She wasn't at Miller's. She was at a motel off Route 3, the kind with flickering neon signs and hourly rates. The fury that surged through me was cold this time. Controlled. Mechanical. I dressed quickly, kissed Owen on the forehead, and asked my neighbor to watch him for an hour or two, under the guise of a last-minute errand. Then I drove. 35 minutes later, I was sitting in the motel's parking lot, engine off, watching her car. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Instead, I waited until she came out. It was just past 9 when the door creaked open and Marcus followed her out. They were laughing, like this wasn't the ruin of a marriage, like none of it mattered. She kissed him once, then again, longer this time. I took a photo, then another, then a short video. Every click of the camera felt like a nail in a coffin. I texted Brenna right then, got the footage. Let's burn this thing to the ground. The next morning, I confronted her, not with rage, but with resolve. She came into the kitchen wearing the sweatshirt I'd bought her on our last vacation. The irony stung. "We need to talk," I said flatly. She paused, sensing something in my voice. "What's wrong?" "I know about the motel." She froze. And I know it wasn't the first time. She sat slowly, her face pale. "Dan, please." "No. I'm not here to listen to lies anymore." Silence. Then, soft and broken. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You've already gone that far, Sarah. You passed it the moment you looked at another man and thought I wouldn't see it. The motel? That's just the monument you built to it." Tears welled in her eyes. But I felt nothing. The well had run dry. I want a divorce. She flinched like I'd struck her. "Dan, please. What about Owen?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "You should have thought about Owen before you decided our home wasn't enough for you." She cried then. Hard, body-shaking sobs that echoed off the kitchen walls. But I stood there unmoved. It was too late for tears. I served her the papers that night. Brenna had arranged for everything. Custody filings, asset lists, even documentation of her absences and neglect. It was a well-oiled machine. The fallout came swiftly. Sarah moved in with a friend from work, claiming she needed space. Marcus was never mentioned by name, but I knew she wasn't alone. Owen asked where Mommy went. I told him gently that sometimes people make mistakes and need time to fix them. He didn't understand. How could he? For a while, I just focused on Owen. On being steady. On proving, day by day, that he wasn't the reason things fell apart. That he was still loved, still safe. Every morning when I packed his lunch, every night when I read to him, I felt the ache of what we'd lost, but also the quiet strength of what I was building in its place. One evening, 2 weeks into the separation, Sarah called. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice was tentative, tired. "About what?" I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really, Dan. I've been lost. I've made horrible choices." I didn't say anything. I think I convinced myself you didn't care. That we were just coasting. "We were coasting because you jumped ship, Sarah." "I know," she whispered. There was a pause. "I still love you." I almost laughed. Almost. "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You love the version of me that let you do whatever you wanted. That turned a blind eye so you could feel special." "Dan, I was hurting too." "You don't fix hurt by burning down your home." She didn't argue. I just wanted to say it. That I'm sorry. That I know I ruined something good. "Yeah," I said, staring at the photo of Owen on my fridge. "You did." We hung up. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of Owen's room, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell in rhythm, arms sprawled across his favorite stuffed bear. The house was quiet now. No laughter from the hallway. No clinking of dishes. Just silence. And somehow, I felt stronger in that silence than I had in months. But just when I thought things had finally settled, that the worst was behind me, I got a message that cracked open a new layer of betrayal. An unknown number. One image. Marcus, standing at the register in Miller's, arm around another woman. Smiling. The caption, "Guess you're not the only one." There are certain moments in life when time seems to stretch, not in silence, but in clarity. That photo of Marcus, arm slung casually around a new woman at the miller's register, was like a trigger to a deeper, colder truth. The man Sarah had gambled everything for, a marriage, a home, her role as a mother, wasn't even capable of pretending loyalty. I stared at the image, heart rate steady, breath even. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. But it was a different kind of pain now. Familiar. Dull. Like pressing on a bruise that had already begun to heal. It was vindication. Not satisfaction exactly. Just confirmation that the ship she'd abandoned us for was already taking on water. I didn't tell her about the photo. Not at first. Instead, I called Brenna. Do I have grounds for sole custody? She didn't hesitate. Given her emotional instability, absence, and now the revolving door of boyfriends? Yes. And with your documentation? Absolutely. We filed the motion the following Monday. It hit Sarah like a tidal wave. She showed up at my doorstep that evening, makeup smeared from crying, hair tied up in a messy knot, holding a single envelope. She didn't even knock, just stood there under the porch light like she didn't know where else to go. Dan, can we talk? I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Owen was doing a puzzle in the living room. I didn't want him seeing her like this. You filed for full custody? She asked, voice cracking. I did. She shook her head slowly, lip trembling. You said we'd co-parent. That Owen would have both of us. I crossed my arms. That was before you disappeared for days at a time. Before you brought strange men into his world without telling me. Before I realized that being your son's father meant protecting him from the version of you that doesn't think past her next thrill. I made mistakes, Dan, I know that. But Marcus and I held up a hand. I know about Marcus. She froze. I know he moved on. I know you saw it. I know you're here now not because you suddenly remembered what you had, but because you realized you never meant anything to him. Her knees buckled slightly, and for a moment I thought she might collapse right there on the porch. I miss Owen, she whispered. I'm not taking him away from you. I said, softer now. I just need the court to understand that right now. I'm the only one giving him stability. You want to rebuild that? Prove it. Show up. Be sober. Be honest. She nodded, eyes wide and damp. I want to. I do. We stood in silence a moment longer before I turned and stepped back inside. She didn't follow. In the months that followed, the dust began to settle. The court ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody. Sarah had supervised visits twice a week, and to her credit, she didn't fight it. She showed up. Quiet, humbled, not quite the person I married, but perhaps inching back towards someone responsible. Marcus disappeared entirely. I heard whispers through the grapevine that he'd been fired for inappropriate conduct with more than one employee, that his charm didn't hold up under scrutiny, that he was now working odd jobs in another town. I felt no satisfaction in hearing that, only a strange pity. Sarah had given everything to someone who wasn't even capable of holding it. The house got quieter, cleaner. I started sleeping better. I found a rhythm, work, playdates, dinner with Owen, bedtime stories. I laughed again, genuinely, for the first time in what felt like years. And Sarah, she changed. Slowly, she started volunteering at Owen's school during her visits, dropping off food she'd baked, sending little notes in his lunchbox that said, I love you, Mom. And for Owen's sake, I let her. I didn't trust her yet, not completely, but I saw the flickers of the woman she used to be. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I found her waiting outside the daycare. Hey, she said as I approached. I nodded. Hey, I wanted to talk. We stood near the swings, watching Owen chase another kid around the mulch. I'm not asking to come back, she said quickly. I know that door's closed, but I just wanted you to know I'm in therapy now. I've stopped drinking. I got a new job at a different store. That's good, I said quietly. I think I needed to lose everything to realize what mattered. I looked at her, really looked. The circles under her eyes were still there, but her voice was steadier. Her hands weren't fidgeting like they used to. Dan, I'll never forgive myself for what I did. But I'm trying. For him. And for myself. I nodded again, slowly. Then keep trying. She blinked, then smiled faintly. Thank you. We stood there for another minute, neither of us needing to say much more. Later that evening, after Owen had fallen asleep with a crayon in his hand and a dinosaur coloring book across his lap, I stepped outside into the backyard. The summer air was still warm, the sky streaked with fading orange. I sat on the porch steps and breathed deeply, watching the wind stir the trees. There had been a time when I thought Sarah and I would grow old together, that we'd sit on these same steps watching Owen bring his own kids over on Sundays. But sometimes, love doesn't survive the way it's supposed to. It mutates. It betrays. And then, if you're lucky, it reshapes itself, not into what it once was, but into something still capable of grace. She and I didn't make it, but Owen would. And so would I. Because heartbreak, for all its devastation, clears space for something new. Something honest. Something that won't flinch under the weight of a hard year and a few bad choices. I looked up at the stars just beginning to peek through the dusky veil above me. It was over now. Really over. And in that finality, I found peace.